Okay, welcome back. Today I'm excited to announce that we're going to draw celebrity Kris Jenner by popular demand. Why would we do this? Because she's instantly recognizable to many of my students, and because this is a great three-quarter view photograph with decent side lighting. So that's why we made this selection. We are going to start by imagining the cranium, which is, it's almost a frontal view, so the cranium's a little bit elongated, but not much. And here's the, I'm going to block this in as a very simplified form. There's the face turning to our right. Notice that the center line of the face would be on a slight angle down and to the right. It's not completely vertical, so we want to get that right off the bat. Whoops, wrong tool there. So this is sort of the angle of the face, and then the angle of the eyes is running 90 degrees to that. So that's going to be roughly like that, and a little below center. A little more space here than here because we are looking down slightly at her head. Or her chin is tipped down, so we're seeing a little more of the top of her head than we are of the throat. Throat is covered completely. And I'm going to do some blocking in of the shoulders. Most of you would probably not think to do that right now, because what you like to do is like draw the eyeball first and don't touch the neck and shoulders until the very end. But it's really useful to just have some idea of how the head is being carried on the shoulders from the very start. So I'm blocking in these two angles. You'll notice I found some reference points on the face to get these angles. And now you can see how she's carrying her head on her shoulders. It's a little, not completely clear, but now because her head is tipped down a little, I'm going to give this eye line a little bit of a curve. And let's continue with a very simplified kind of blocking in. So the nose, well, let me block in the eyebrows. And the nose is going to be about halfway between the eyebrows and the bottom of the chin. So we measured this distance here to here, and this distance. These, you can see, are about the same. So we've got this distance, this distance. And why don't I go ahead and I'm going to draw. This is a really good technique if you can get used to it. I'm not going to do anything else with the features before I have done a quick shadow map and first shading. So I'm going to shadow map the side of the nose, under the nose, the upper lip, the side of the cheek. I know this is going to seem completely random to you guys, but just bear with me. Just try to copy the shapes that I'm drawing, and don't even think, oh, this is a chin. This is, don't think about what they are. Just try to draw those shapes. And up here we have a cast shadow of the hair onto the forehead. And something like that. And now the first shading is going to look like this. We're going to just, remember, if you're right-handed, you're going to go the other direction. I got a little piece of shadow under the bottom lip. This method is really efficient in my mind because when you start to see this pattern of lights and darks, you can start to read errors before you've really done any significant amount of work. So like I can look at my drawing and see that this little piece of shadow is a little too low for the upper lip, so I'm going to move it up a little. And you can fine-tune your whole drawing before you've committed any time to creating any details anywhere. Now, there's two other pieces of shadow that are critically important, and those are the irises. It's useful to think of the irises as shadows because they are recessed behind the whites of the eyes. And so when you put the irises in as darks, you can instantly start to read your drawing. You can read the gaze, the direction of the gaze, and there's also a little shadow of the upper lid onto the white of the eye, like that. And there's one other piece of shadow I'm going to throw in, that a very small one under the cheek on this side. And I end up with something like this. Again, the goal here, none of this is measured, so none of it's going to be perfect. But the goal is to get something on the page that you can see as a person, because then your brain's going to tell you what's wrong with your drawing. I can see I made the nose a little too long, so look what I'm going to do. I'm just going to raise this shadow up a little bit like that. And instead of redrawing entire features, all I'm doing is adjusting shadow shapes, like pushing them and pulling them until my brain registers a kind of a likeness. Now, I'm going to have an easier time than you because she's frankly not that familiar to me, so I could do a pretty bad likeness of Kris Jenner and be satisfied with it, but if you have spent a lot of time watching the Kardashian television program, then you're going to have a higher standard for this likeness, and you're going to not be as easily satisfied with your drawing as I'm going to be with mine. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just bumping these shadow shapes around until my brain is satisfied that the gaze and the likeness and the expression are all adequate. And that's very different from how most of my students approach portraiture. Most beginners treat it like we're just going to draw an eye and a nose and a mouth, and then we're going to color everything in. Like the shading comes last after all the forms have been completely committed to, and that is not as reliable a method in my experience as what I'm showing you here, where you really don't make any commitment to anything until you're starting to see a likeness. If you're not working at an easel, this is a good time to put your drawing up for a second. You see, if you get your drawing as close as possible to the reference, you're going to have an easier time spotting differences between your drawing and the reference. And that's something that I don't know why that's not more obvious to people, but if you know those games that kids play where you have to like find the difference between two pictures, obviously you're going to do better at that game if the pictures are right next to each other. And if you're trying to play that game, you're going to move your pictures so they're really close together so you can see how they're different. Yet for some reason, people don't believe they need to do that when they're drawing. They believe that they can just like have their sketchbook, on a table 4 feet away from the reference and just look up and look down and remember what they saw. And you really can't. You have to get to where they are both in your field of vision at the same time, and then the problems in the drawing are just going to jump out at you. Ready or not, we're going to get into the individual features now. Now, in an ideal world where you're not trying to keep up with me, you could keep adjusting everything until you're really happy with the likeness, but we're just going to leave it here for now. And we're now going into the shapes of the individual features. As I've explained before, your brain has two distinct recognition systems for human faces. One is the Gestalt right brain system, which is what we're leaning on in the first stage of this drawing, and that's like just how the features are arranged in relation to each other. But you also have a left brain analytical feature analysis system that does a top to bottom, feature by feature assessment of the person. And what we're doing now as we try to draw this eye exactly as we see it is we're trying to use the left brain to get each feature one at a time looking like it does here. And this is where we're starting to think about the shapes of the white of the eye and kind of drilling down on a very fine level. And that's why it's dangerous to get into detailed features too soon, because as soon as you do that, your right brain system kind of turns off. Okay, so she's got a little shadow shape under the lower lid that we didn't do before. Little piece of light in between the white of the eye here and the lash line here. A little deepening of the shadow above the upper lid and a little shadow under the eyebrow. Like that. Is this as close as I can get? Yeah. Now we can be a little more definite about these shadows around the shape of the eye. A little darkening right here. And a very subtle reflected light along the side of the nose. So see how it gets darker here, and a little lighter in between. And there's a little bit of a sharpness to this plane change here. And you always want to check, so here's the bottom of the eye socket. Here's this plane change, and you can see right here is where the top of the ala starts. You always want to check that distance between the bottom of the eye socket and the top of the ala. The ala, you'll recall, is the winged form around the nostril. And you'll see a lot of shading on the ala that should remind you of a sphere or an egg. We've got the main form shadow, which I didn't do the first shading on yet, and a little core shadow through here, and a strong cast shadow behind the form and under the form. And here we're getting into a little more detail with the nostril form, which is relatively small. And then this core shadow that we did along the bridge of the nose extends down. It gets a little lighter, but it extends all the way down to the tip of the nose. Now, one of the most common errors that people make is to make the features too symmetrical in a 3/4 view. So notice the nostril on this side is about 3 times wider than the nostril on this side. So don't let yourself make this one too big. This one is just a little pinprick compared to this one. And it doesn't have a full shadow around, it just has like a half tone. You see that this level of detail is starting to create more of a likeness. And what I want you to do is just keep drawing whatever I'm drawing. You can always go back later, but I don't want you to miss some of my comments. So here we're seeing something a little confusing, maybe a little, I don't really know. I can't tell where her mouth ends. Like the upper lip seems to end here, right? But this crease extends all the way to this fold. So I don't know. I think that's just a wrinkle, but maybe it's been pulled tight by some possible plastic surgery. Yeah, it's not quite a natural looking form. You see how this now let's look carefully at the line between the lips. So here's the curve in the center portion of the mouth is very low and deep on her. You see that? Very wide and slightly deep, I should say. And then it straightens out to here. And then on this side, as we would expect, the mouth is very much more foreshortened. So it's this side of it is much shorter. And we do have only this portion of the upper lip is in shadow. The rest of this color is just pigmentation or lipstick. Okay, so this is not in shadow over here, so we're barely going to touch it. It would be a mistake to shade that because it's getting full light. Let's see if we have this. Yeah, we have the same kind of crease on this side, but it's much shorter because it's turning away from us. And the lower lip is also in full light, so we can't rely on shading to show that. We're going to very faintly indicate the plane change, like that. And only right here does the lower lip turn into shadow. So we're going to add this little shadow accent here. And we've already indicated this little area of shadow under the bottom lip, but that's a very small area, again, because the lips don't look quite natural. So the bottom lip, it looks like it's been plumped, but it's not really projecting very far. And here is this little halftone here, very important though, because it's sort of showing this, the way the skin is stretched around that crease. And that continues and sort of, this halftone merges with the top of the shadow under the chin. So now sometimes you'll need to adjust your shadow map a little bit when you get into detail. I feel like my shadow on the chin was coming up a little high. Here's a very strong reflected light under the chin, so I'm going to do this plane change first where the chin overlaps the neck down here with the pretty strong cast shadow. And here again, this is just like shading an egg. We're going to shade up across this core shadow to get that form to turn under into that reflected light. You see that? And that just creates, that's the only way we can create a sense of this plane that's turning away from us facing the ground, is with that reflected light. And this is a soft transition because it's a rounded form. Here we're getting into a little bit of a crease, so we're going to do a little bit of a harder transition to show that it's not a sharp angle, but it's definitely a more abrupt plane change than that one. And the reason I'm talking continuously is not just to fill the air with my voice. It's to these are the kinds of things that I would be saying to myself as I'm drawing, and if you can learn to say these things to yourself, to really think through the plane changes and the values that you're seeing, it's going to help a lot. So I'm going to back out a little bit again. We can see how we're doing with the overall effect. So here on the other side of the nose is another fairly sharp plane change. When you think about it, when we refer to someone as being youthful looking, we're going to say they have very smooth face, right? So that's what we mean by that smoothness is that all the plane changes are very gradual. And on this older face, we're seeing more abrupt plane changes. But some of them have been artificially kind of smoothed out, so we're seeing some things that are a little bit different. Okay, so here's a place where I really did not deal with this contour at the first stages of the drawing, but see this, the turn of the chin is to the left of the corner of the mouth here. So we want to indicate where that chin turns up, and it aims for this little halftone. And then the jawline is emerging from behind the chin, like that, and then it is merging up here with the line of the cheek. Okay, so as I assess my work, seeing a little bit of an error because I can see this eyelid is really dead horizontal, and you see how I've got it sort of angling like that? So I'm going to make a little correction here, and you might need to do the same thing. I really wasn't accounting for the way this eye wraps around the side of the head, so make sure that this lid is on a perfect horizontal. And we're going to zoom in on this eye, always a good practice, to study the shape of this eyelid. Tapers to the inside. Curls around the eye on the right, and there's a lot of mascara or something. And now we're going to get a little more specific about the gaze. You see in my drawing, this dark was kind of a placeholder for the iris, but in my drawing she looks a little cross-eyed. So I don't need to erase anything though, because this was just a sort of a hint. What I'm going to do is just mark that there is actually some white of the eye showing in the inside corner here. So I'm going to mark that margin. And then I'm studying this shape here, the shape of the white on the other side. And I think I overcorrected. I need a little more white showing on this side to get the gaze exactly where I want it. Like that. You'll notice there's a little highlight on the eye. If you want to try to capture that, just shade around it. You'll also notice though that the white of the eye on this inside corner is in shadow, because remember it's curving this way, so it's being affected by the light just the way this cheek is, so it's shaded on the left and in the light on the right. And yet the iris is brighter than the white of the eye in that inside corner. So if you copy that effect, you're going to have that kind of glowing iris effect, which most people find pretty impressive in a portrait. Now, with apologies, I need to correct this one more time, because what I minimize, and what I'm afraid probably you're going to minimize too, is just the amount of dark showing here to here. Because this eye is slightly closer to us than this one, we want to be really careful not to make this one bigger, which is what I was doing. So and I might need to slightly enlarge this one at the same time. I'm trying to just get them balanced. There are some kind of strange asymmetries going on with these eyes. And her eyebrows look kind of painted on, because they probably are. So we want to get that nice and neat. Kris, if you're watching, I don't have anything against you. I'm just... And we have just a little bit of a hint of a halftone under the white of the eye on this side. And notice she's got a very prominent kind of full cheekbone on this side, and then a little flattening of the head at the temple. I would call this just a very steep uphill, not quite vertical though. So we're going about just a couple degrees off from vertical. Okay, we are getting there. We're going to zoom out again and see if we're getting the overall effect. I'm pretty happy, but again, I don't really watch this show, so. What I'm trying to do now is just get these darks along the side of the face. But I'm going to take a little bit of a measurement here. I think this may be the first measurement I've taken on this drawing, but I'm just going to measure, see this space here to here? And then we're going to look at this comparable space on this side. And you'll notice that this space is about 4 times the size of this space. Everyone following me? So the reason I'm measuring that is because we all are going to tend to underestimate this difference. So be sure that this space is about 4 times as big as that space. So that's where we're going to draw down. Here's a great example of some parallel lines that we can refer to. You see how the angle of the temple and the angle of the side of the face and the angle of the bridge of the nose are all about the same. So anytime you see sets of lines like that, very useful to make a mental note of them. And that's a good way to catch errors, like maybe I don't have this shadow quite sloped enough. Boom, boom, boom. So having found the side of the face, we still have the ear, which is in shadow off to the left of it. Let me get rid of this. And what we're going to ask ourselves here is, where is the earlobe in relation to the nose? It's about the height of the nostril. Top of the ear is the height of the eyebrows. So the top of the ear is going to go up here. Bottom of the ear is going to go here. And the ear, as I said, is in deep shadow, so we're going to do a first shading on it. And we're not going to worry too much about detail. So a little few shadow accents, but we can't really see the forms of the ear. And now we need to look carefully at some of these transitions. It's not self-evident what's happening here. This is a little skin fold which sort of follows the jawline and then dives down beneath it. You see that? It goes down to here. And it kind of overlaps this other little skin fold, which is part of the neck. And then the collar comes up behind that one. Like that. The form of this cast shadow sort of intensifies this skin fold because it goes up and over it like that. But you'll notice that there's no clear demarcation in value of where the jawline is. So we're just going to leave this, we're going to shade this down pretty flat. Now, here's another. You'll notice that this big round cheek is another kind of egg-like form. And I probably need to just bump this shading a little to the left to make that cheek a little wider, and then I'm going to do my core shadow just like I did on the chin, shading across this edge to create that nice soft turn. And here's a sharper edge where this little piece of light under the cheek is falling. There's a little cast shadow here, and then that merges with this light, which really shows the sense of the skin being stretched pretty tightly through here. Okay. We can go maybe a little darker along the side of this cheek, but not too dark because we have to save our darkest darks for inside the hair. Here she's got this little sideburny kind of piece of hair and another clump falling to the left of her eye. And we better back out again so we can see what we're trying to do here. So you could think of her head as like a pair of overlapping circles. There's basically one here, and then there's another one that lifts up higher back here. That's not her cranial form, that's like just what her hair happens to be doing. And then I'm going to darken my first shading through the hair because she's very dark hair. And I like to put in that local color on a brunette before I shadow map it. And that's why we don't shadow map the hair first, because the shadow map's going to get covered up by the local coloring. So now the shadow mapping begins. And what we're always looking for in hair are these flame shapes. And I'm going to press really hard now because I'm shading into these darks. And all I'm doing is looking for an approximation of these forms of dark accents. And I'm going to press really hard so you can see what I'm doing here. And there's a couple little pieces of dark over here. And that's just like shadow mapping the skin, but again, a lot darker because it needs to be visible on top of that area that's already darkened. So now I'm going to shade with the direction the hair is growing inside these shadow maps, continuing to press pretty hard. And I'm not trying to create too many really soft edges because her hair has a little bit of shine to it. And the way you create an effect of gloss is with clear boundaries between your darks and your lights. So I'm not trying to soften these transitions like I did on the cheek. Now, if you fail to soften your transitions adequately on the skin, this is what happens. You get the effect of shiny or greasy skin, which is generally not what we're after. Okay, I'm going to take a break in a minute. Just erase some of my construction lines first. And this would be a good time for me to walk away from my drawing for a few minutes just because I've been staring at it for a while and there may be errors that I've just gotten used to seeing in the drawing and that I've become blind to. So if you walk away for a few minutes and then come back, those errors are going to jump out at you. I don't know if it's the lighting or her structure, but I can't even find like where the pit of her neck is. It's like, it's hard to read this, what's going on here. So as I was looking at your drawings, I could see that I might have been a little unkind in terms of maybe she has a little more suggestion of a jawline. You see how this reflected light comes up a little higher, and it was remarked to me that I was making her look a little too fat, which I think I was. Okay, all my viewers at home, I'm going to have to say goodbye in a minute because this class is ending. We had some really interesting drawings with my students today. I would love to show them to you. So before we say goodbye, I'm just going to show you a few of the drawings done by my students today. We're not going to identify anybody, but you can see what they did with Kris Jenner. And thank you very much for watching.